You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Hey listeners, let me let you in on a little secret. You don't have to stress about planning your class lessons, small groups, and individual sessions anymore. My school counseling membership program, Impact, is here to help. So, what do Impact members get? Monthly curriculum plans across all 3 tiers, SEL lessons, small groups, individual, and seasonal activities, step-by-step video implementation guides, bi-weekly Zoom coaching calls with me, and an exclusive Facebook group community. This membership is designed for school counselors who want to deliver the best possible content to their students, but who also want to just press the easy button. You'll get access to monthly curriculum plans, resources, support, and community so you can deliver quality, engaging, life-changing counseling lessons to your kiddos. So what do you think? Are you ready to make an impact? Join today at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So happy September! This month, I want to talk to you all about social skills. So sometimes on the podcast, I like to really narrow in on a counseling topic and talk about how we can support students through all 3 tiers and just like a deep dive on that topic. So for example, back in March, we did anxiety. So during September, I want to do social skills because I feel like as we're, back to school, this is going to be one of those referrals that you're likely starting to get a lot of. So this week, I want to talk to you all about just like an introduction to social skills, just like your basic social skills. So a few things come to mind when I personally think social skills. 2 things really. The first thing is like explicit teaching of social skills, like how students should behave in social situations. And I'm thinking of curriculum like social thinking or, students who really need that explicit instruction, like how to make a friend, how to start a conversation. Those very explicit social skills. But then I also think about it in terms of like the umbrella term, which I think a lot of teachers and parents think of it as like, oh, social skills. Yeah, like friendship's a social skill and conflict resolution's a social skill and self-regulation's a social skill. I guess technically those all kind of fall under a bigger umbrella of social skills, but I really like to narrow in on it, and here's why. So sometimes I would hear teachers at my school being like, oh yeah, they're seeing her for social skills, or go to your social skills group. But I would really be seeing the kids for something more specific, like anger management or friendship or self-regulation or stress reduction or grief, like any of these things, right? And a lot of times people would use it loosely or broad and say like, oh, the social skills group or the friendship club. And I like to think that titles matter regarding advocating for our program, right? So it's really important that we're clear on what we're doing with our students. And it's for 2 reasons. For number 1, we want to just bring clarity to our position and the services that we provide, right? So by bringing clarity to the services we provide, people can better access our services. So if we, instead of just like calling everything social skills or friendship club, if we specifically say like, oh, the anger management group, well, a parent or a teacher may hear that and be like, oh my gosh, our counselor offers anger management counseling. This is great. This is exactly what the student needs. So it's bringing awareness to the services we provide. In turn, by doing that, we're also advocating for our role. So we're showing that we're so much more than just like this friendship club facilitator who's like, all she does is lunch bunch and they just do generic little games. Like, no, we are specialists and we know what we're doing, and we are specialized to help students in all of these different areas. So that's my little tangent on advocating. You guys know how I feel about that. But don't trivialize what you're doing, Yes, sometimes if it is a friendship club, you can call it friendship club. Or if it is a social skills group, call it social skills group. But if it's something more specific, let's call it by its name. And I think names really matter and titles matter. So that's just something I wanted to bring up. Anywho, social skills. So I am leaning toward that first definition whenever I'm referring to social skills. I'm talking about kids who need explicit, specific instruction on how they can socially interact with others. So I was doing some research for this episode, and I wanted to share with you a quote, or not really a quote, a definition from a website. So this is from childdevelopment.com. It's an Australian website. And it says, social skills are the skills we use every day to interact and communicate with others. They include verbal and nonverbal communication, such as speech, gesture, facial expression, and body language. So yes, this is exactly what I'm thinking of. Like showing students to look at people's faces. How do you think they're feeling? Let's look at these nonverbal cues. Let's try to understand these things. How would we talk to someone about this? How would we interact with someone about this? So I love this definition. I think that's spot on. So in the series, as I'm talking about social skills, that is specifically what I'm talking about. And then, of course, I had to check our old faithful Ask a website to see how the school counselor's role is involved in developing social skills. So I'll read a little snippet from them, and obviously I'll link to both of these in the show notes so you can continue doing your own reading and research as well. But ASCA says, the school counselor is key to identifying students' social emotional needs. Educational systems as a whole, including school counselors, should graduate students who are not only proficient in core academic subjects, but demonstrate an ability to socially and emotionally practice healthy behaviors and behave respectfully when working with others from diverse backgrounds. So as we know, our role as the school counselor is not just to help students succeed academically, but we want to really cater to that social emotional piece, right? And a big part of that is social skills. So this is huge. So why should school counselors care about social skills? Well, schools kind of mimic society, right? They're like little mini versions of society that are preparing kiddos to go to the outside world. So we need to make sure that kids can work well with each other. We need to make sure that they can understand each other. These are all things that are really necessary in order to thrive in society and in the school setting. But it's also, I was thinking about it from even like a more primal perspective, like in order to survive, like back in the day, the cavemen had to work well and cooperate at times, like a tribe mentality, in order to survive. So it's like a fundamental innate skill that we need to have. That being said, it's not always easy for everyone. A lot of times, you know how when we're good at something, we don't understand how it could be difficult for someone else. And sometimes someone would say like, oh, you're so good at that. Can you please do a presentation on it, or can you please explain it to us? And you're thinking like, isn't this common sense? I thought everyone knew how to do this. But sometimes when something comes really naturally to you, or you're really good at it, it's hard for you to understand how it could be difficult for others. And I think social skills is one of those things. I'm a very social person, very outgoing. I can talk to a rock. Obviously, I have a podcast. I just sit here and talk to no one. Oh, you guys are listening, I hope. But so it's sometimes hard for me to understand, before I was a school counselor, like, oh, people need to be taught, like, how to have a conversation, how to do this. Like, everyone's brains are different, right? And not everyone has that key understanding, and they need to be taught these skills. So I think that's something that we want to keep in mind. I remember the same thing happened. I started my studies in marketing. Like, I was going to major in marketing when I was a freshman in college. And then I had to take an intro to psychology class. Completely fell in love with it. Thought it was just like super fascinating and super easy. Not that the teacher didn't do a good job or it was too easy, but it just came so natural to me. I was just like, oh, this is super interesting. And I just totally get it. Like, I love this. So I switched my major to psychology. And then I went on, to study psychology. And I remember when we were registering for classes, there were like different levels of severity of the classes that you had to have. And somehow, me, I didn't want to go to class on Fridays, and I didn't want any 8 a.m.s. So the way I scheduled my classes, I ended up having like 3 or 4 of the really like dense, hard classes all in the same semester. And my advisor was like, most people spread these out, like we encourage them to, but the way I wanted it with my class times and everything, if I didn't want to budge on that, I was going to have to take all the hard classes in one semester. And he was concerned that I was going to struggle because these were the most demanding courses. This was like my junior year. And I didn't change it because I'm stubborn and I like my sleep and stuff, right? So I ended up taking them all at once, but I did really well. I mean, A's and B's. And I remember thinking like, oh, it wasn't that hard. Like, why was he so concerned? I feel like I'm really discrediting the rigor of my university, but shout out GCSU Bobcats. No, but I'm really not. Like, I definitely took classes there that were very challenging, for sure. And I'm not saying these classes weren't challenging. I'm just saying I was so passionate about them. And to me, it just clicked. Like, psychology just clicked and I loved it. And when I would learn things in psychology, it just made sense to me. Like, oh, of course people behave that way based on this. And that's kind of how I fell in love with the field of counseling and then, the work I do now. So it just goes to show that when you're kind of good at something and it comes naturally to you and it's just a good fit and you're in the flow with it, then it's hard to understand how other people may struggle with a similar thing. So I feel like social skills is like that. We need to understand that sometimes our kiddos don't know these basic things like understanding emotions, how to talk to someone, and so on. So that's why I'm really passionate about teaching social skills to others. And I want to talk about how a lot of times these students are special education students, students with autism, students who may be seeing the speech language pathologist. I know the speech teacher, I was close with one of our former speech teachers, and she was all about like the pragmatics of speech, right? So not just the articulation piece, but like the social piece. And I always thought that was really fascinating. And her and I actually worked together. She used a lot of the social thinking curriculum, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But there was a lot of overlap between like my social skills counseling and her speech pragmatics. So it's really interesting when you think about it that way as well. Like these populations usually need some additional support with social skills and with developing those social skills. But also just everyone needs some social skills counseling, right? So of course that's where we come in as the school counselor, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this series, how we can serve these students through tier 1, 2, and 3. So in tier 1, I'm going to show you guys how you can deliver social skills class lessons. That's giving that counseling to everyone in the preventative level. And then tier 2 would be about a social skills small group. So I've run these small groups, and they usually have a mix of gen ed and special ed students in them. And then tier 3 would be individual counseling sessions. So for students who need a little more support with social skills than a group can offer. That being said, I think the group, it's one of those groups that's great because they're practicing the skill just by being in the group itself. So kind of like a friendship group or a conflict resolution group, they're getting to practice the skill of social skills by being in a group, whereas it's a little harder and just more conceptual if you're doing that on the individual level. Okay guys, well there you have it. That is my little introduction to social skills to get you excited for this month's series. Short episode today. I just kind of wanted to chat with you guys on where our baseline is for social skills. So I will talk to you next week with some concrete ideas on how you can start implementing this at your school site right away. Talk then.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.